Good morning. How's it going? John Ellison here from ReFi Podcast. I am so excited to kick off season 2 with my good friend Simar from Magic Ventures. Simar is a friend of mine that I met at Cello Connect in Barcelona earlier this spring. We've developed a relationship as John X has very consciously decided to take a step back for the next couple months to give himself some space and take care of his own needs as he balances a lot of different factors in his personal and professional life. Today, we are having a chance to look forward at what the next 12 weeks look at for us at ReFi Podcast as a new duo. And we know that John's going to be coming back and hosting future episodes. I'm probably going to take a back seat and take some time for myself as we move to Portugal later this year. And just wanted to shift gears, set off a new tone, kick off a new series of episodes, and talk to another whole host of amazing guests. And this season, we're going to look beyond carbon towards biodiversity, water, plastic, even social justice, to try and uncover what are the underpinning ideas and technologies that are driving forward this current extractive economy, and how do we shift things to a regenerative paradigm where the creation and flow of money itself is actually restorative to the natural capital assets that we all depend upon to survive. So here we are with Simar, with our first episode together. I hope you enjoy it. We're trying to have fun. We're really enjoying ourselves along the ride. And we're digging deep into our own personal story, trying to uncover what we need to really make the most of this movement for ourselves and share this as an offering and a gift to anyone else who's trying to make sense of this crazy intersection between climate and Web3. Thanks for tuning in today, and look forward to dropping an episode every single week for the next 12 and see where we take this from here. Thanks for your time. Have fun. We're here, bro. Season 2, man. Good morning, Simar. How are you, brother?
I'm doing great, John. It is great to be here with you. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
Man, yeah, I'm stoked. I've gotten an energy burst just by being in the same space with you towards the end of my day. But yeah, really excited for this. And yeah, for everybody who's listening, just kicking off season 2 of ReFi Podcast with a new friend who feels like an old friend, the chance to start a new adventure together. Season 1 was such a great experience working with John and seeing his absolute plethora of wisdom that he's acquired over the years. And yeah, just so honored that he has decided to take some time for himself, given all the things that happened in his personal and professional life. And that's opened the opportunity for a new relationship and a new process of learning with you, Simar. Feel like our connection just dropped out of the sky at the right point in time, and can't wait to see what we discover together. But first, before jumping in, I just wanted to give ourselves and everyone else listening a chance to just arrive and be where we are, whether we're washing dishes or commuting to work, exercising, or just listening intently, to just be here now and to give our attention. It's a great gift to have you here, Simar. I'd love to have a chance to hear about you and your background, like why you've come here and decided to carve out what seems like a pretty big chunk of your time over the next 12 weeks, or potentially, hopefully even more, to do this podcast together. Do you want to give us a bit of a background, like where you've come from, what your story is, and how you've come to this place?
Totally, man. I so beautifully started off. Thank you. Thank you, John. Feeling is mutual. Such a gift to be here with you. It's feeling so much gratitude. I would say just to honor my journey really begins with my parents. My parents both. My mom grew up in a village in India, in Punjab. My dad grew up in a small city, Ludhiana. Both of them came over, and both my parents are entrepreneurs. So they both came. My mom started off as a bank teller, and then her bank manager was like, "Hey, you're really sharp," and then she ended up starting her own mortgage and real estate company, and my dad did electrical engineering in India, but then he taught it, when he came to the United States, he learned computer science and then, worked at some tech companies, then started his own trucking logistics company, and is now on his way as an executive at a company called All Data, and doing stuff with AutoZone. But my parents, I would say, the person I am is very much like culturally and like just comes so much from my parents. And so I grew up in Fremont, I grew up in the Bay, around both of them. And I feel like one of the things that my parents always sort of instilled within me, and this is a part at least of like the faith that they grew up in, was like this idea of service and finding God, finding divine, whatever people's religious beliefs are, but like just finding service is the way to connect more deeply with life. And I think that was always a theme that carried through me, so like when I was in high school, for example, worked on building I started learning computer science and started basically like building out like a community service tracking tool, and then went on to build like a virtual whiteboard with a few friends to help students tutor one another online. And then teachers started holding office hours. And then when I went to Stanford, studied computer science there, but then also within that studied biocomputation as well as artificial intelligence. And for me, it was it's always been this deep connection to nature, of how can we use the principles of nature to better understand how we can build sustainable technology, and then vice versa. Some of the most incredible, I think, advances from neural networks down to even how we think about hardware, and there's so many parallels of what we can find in biology to what we can find, in technology. And I, it's like been this journey of there's been the intellectual of like sort of recognizing these things, but there's always been like, I think like, we talked about this, I think at the beginning, but the personal journey that's unfolded. One of the things that sort of happened in my world was, back in high school, one of my a dear classmate of mine, she committed suicide, and that was really, really tough around how do you navigate a world which is reaching for more and this push to go forward, but at the same time, it feels like there's things that are breaking down, in this similar way. Like, hey, we're extracting so much from our environment, but then, what's happening, sort of in the wake. And I think I began to grapple with that my junior year, and it's what led to, going, starting therapy, after I started my first company, going to the Amazon rainforest and spending time in Peru, and then coming back, and then, Sepp, who is at Cello, he guided, sort of directed me towards Charles Eisenstein and some of his work around sacred economics, and, began a journey around how do we facilitate and build community together on circular economies, sort of going down and down and down and down, and continuing to feel like, okay, crypto and Web3, which is, one of my good friends, Zach, introduced me to back in 2015, 2016, has the power to unlock collaboration, at scale in a borderless way. And feeling that, and then feeling the sort of like, okay, we've got these challenges around capitalism and extraction and what we're doing to our environment, and how can these things come together, and and it was really thinking about these questions. And we met back in Cello Connect, right back in April. And I remember looking at you on stage and listening to you, and it was so beautiful, because I remember so distinctly, you were like, yes, like, we were talking about all the intellectual content, but part of the invitation that you offered was like, hey, what if we could look at the world with childlike eyes and a childlike heart and wonder about what we wanted to create together? And there was such a purity and an authenticity with how you were showing up that I remember, like, I was like, I gotta reach out. I gotta connect with this guy. And, one thing after the next, I think, with being here and why being here with you, I would say a big part of that is you, John. You and how you show up, and the presence with which you show up, the love and the care with which you show up, the vision that you hold. It's, you are such an inspiration. And so I feel really grateful to be here. Like, I think that you are a big part, and our friendship is a big part of me being here. And then the other side of this that I think is really beautiful is just like, we talked about ReFi, regenerative finance, and that includes carbon, that includes biological diversity, and how we think about sustaining our environment, but it also talks about how we sustain ourselves and regenerate sort of on every layer, at the individual level, at the community level, at the collective level. How do we really get into a practice of regeneration? And I think there is no more important challenge right now than how we think about and design our economic systems to be in greater integrity and in alignment with who we are as people and how we want to show up. And it's not to force anything on anybody, but to create an invitation for how we could be. And I think that, just the chance to be able to explore that with you, bring in, awesome speakers, it's a dream come true. It's to be here with you. So, I'll pause there. If there's anything that comes up, that I missed, feel free to flag. But it's one of those things where you can never, when it happens and it feels right, you're like, yeah, how could this have ever been any different? But, when the dots are connecting forward, sometimes you can never tell. You're like, you're sort of figuring things out. But I call it a drop from the universe or things beyond our recognition, aligning things. Then who knows? But what I do know is that being here, right here with you in this moment is exactly where I need to be and what I want to be doing.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's been such a gift for me as well. It's not often that you can connect with people who really are deeply committed to that inner work of self-care while also trying to do things with great ambition and, scale and reach and risk. There's a lot at stake as we look at our climate, as we look at our financial systems, as we look at, anything that's borderless. We're pushing up against the boundaries of the past and the world that has been so far, which desperately needs to change. And it's calling out to all of us, as you said, to really recognize, I think, what that calling is inside of ourselves, of who we really want to be. Because, as I've also gotten into some of Eisenstein's work, thanks to Sepp as well, there is this kind of emergence of a new story that's beckoning a deeper part of our nature that I think has been long neglected throughout the industrial age, especially, that we can see glimpses of in, ancient traditions that call to, a more rich experience of life that recognizes the connectedness of everything and also embraces the individual. And I would hope that over the next 12 weeks, as we drop these weekly episodes with all these brilliant people, we can kind of touch on this, because my sense is so many people who are in climate have discovered themselves in this space because they found an answer in their heart, in their mind, about who they are. And it connects to something much greater and much bigger. And the complexity of this space is such that we have to break down, the superficial construct of the self that tells us, we're separate and the only thing that exists is us and our needs, and the accumulation of wealth in the form of, money. And, there's just a real, I think, awakening, a kind of a renaissance, so to speak, of new ideas that's pushing forward this movement. But at the same time, like, we're seeing the sort of claws of extraction and separation and I think, a lot of other vectors that surface trying to kind of hold presence and to hold the status quo. And, there's this interesting tension between the world of extraction, the world of regeneration. And I think in ReFi, we're really finding ourselves at that actual pivot point in between. And I've found doing this podcast incredibly useful, but also it's been so powerful just to enter the space and to be seen and to be recognized. And yet I think one of the most beautiful things that we can do is to create a platform that supports people from all walks of life to create content and to share stories and to be seen and to have a voice. And so that's why I was so excited and honored that we could enter into this relationship and experiment with different hosts, that there's times where I can take a back seat and some, up and coming leader can come and host space. You and John can do episodes, that it's not just like a one or two person show, that we can really open this up and create a movement around people that are absolutely committed to impact, whatever it takes, using the right tools for the job, technology, consciousness, all the things in the mix. And so I think that's really where I feel like we're coming to in this. And it's cool to have a chance to pause and look back, but also shift gears and, recognize, hey, this is where we're at, time is running out and we've got to make stuff happen. So
it's one of those things where, everything you said was just so beautiful. And I think there's just like a few even threads there that I think just so accurately describe just where we are like right now. It's sort of like, great, we've had a particular set of systems and paradigms, that have like led us to where we are. And I think it's important to actually acknowledge and recognize how much has come from the past several hundred years of technology and innovation and industrialization, like the level at which we can now, create, our sort of like creative power and in what we've been able to do in terms of like lifting up a quality of life for many people around the world, recognizing that many have been excluded from our current system, that we now have a chance. It's not to make anything, a problem per se, but to make it recognize like, hey, like there's a way in which everything we've done so far has worked to get us to this point, but we don't need to play out the same patterns to go forward. And there's ways in which it's breaking down, in the same way that like, we get a fever whenever we're feeling sick, like we're seeing things play out. And I think there's a way in which, just like to call it, like it feels like nature and our environment is holding up a mirror back to us and being like, hey, like we have a chance to choose something different. We have a chance to reflect, to awaken, as you said, and begin to step into a place of choosing and creating what we want, and the relationship with each other, relationship with ourselves, relationship with our environment that we want to have. And recognizing that like, yeah, there are consequences if we continue to go down the route that we're currently on, like if we continue on the path that we are going to face the loss of many, many species going extinct. We're going to continue to face climate, natural disaster sort of types of events. We're going to continue to face up against real biological constraints that will start to hamper in. And so I think it's a recognition of like, yeah, we can continue to go on the path that we're on, and it's going to be incredibly costly to us, to our systems, to our, to ourselves. And can we, to echo what you said earlier, like, can we dream and wonder? And I think with the next 12 episodes, the season ahead of us, really mind meld with some of the most brilliant minds in the space to see where we can go, start to, to really cultivate a community of people, a tribe of people that we're all figuring and exploring this out with, because it's not going to be one person figuring this out. This is, I think, part of this is going to require an ecosystem, like ecosystem driven, approach to all of this, which is going to include us as a part, which is going to include many other people as a part, everybody playing their role and speaking their voice and sharing their voice, So I'm excited to explore that too. I think, the convergence of the individual and personal journeys that led everybody here, as well as, great, how do we address the most tactical challenges at hand so we can start to shift, how we've been doing things up until this point.
Totally. Yeah. And I think as we embrace that ecosystem mindset and looking to build this movement, we're already starting to see the introduction of, I think, some of the patterns which have been destructive and extractive in the past. Tribalism is a really common thing. And, I think nation states do a great job and a terrible job of harnessing this energy in some ways, because it allows people to coordinate, create an identity, people to build a home. But I think we're beginning to see a level of kind of tribalism and ReFi that, it just doesn't feel long-term. It doesn't feel sustainable and regenerative. And also with the introduction of large amounts of capital, I mean, we saw Flow Carbon announce a $70 million Series A with, the biggest names in venture capital behind it. And, we know from other budding industries that as soon as large institutional capital comes in, things change. And I think the reality of this introduction is important. And I'm really kind of conscious that, again, we have an opportunity to rethink what those relationships look like, both with ourselves, with founders and as investors, because frankly, like the people who are investing in ReFi do have the consciousness of the problems that we're facing, and, both the severity and the scale and the urgency. And so I think there's some really interesting challenges as we navigate how to self-organize, how to connect with like-minded people, break down the barriers, bring people in, and how to work with these incumbent legacy actors like the voluntary carbon market, like Vera. I think this present moment in ReFi where, there's basically no carbon coming on chain, A, because of price, but B, because of Vera, prohibiting the tokenization of retired credits, and then like not doing anything about it. And I'm very grateful that we have a chance to speak with Benoit, the director of financial innovation, later in the season to understand, how they're navigating this. But the reality is like this again is like another epic coordination challenge, taking an industry that's evolved over a couple decades. We shook the foundations of the voluntary carbon market over 6 months between Claim and Toucan. And like, of course they were going to respond. And like pseudo-anonymous avatars using degen language on Twitter. Like, what do they make of this? How do they understand this space? And, how do we interact with this old world? How do organizations like the nation state interface as regulation is coming into play? And we're really looking at how to use Web3 as coordination tools. So I think this is a really pressing kind of call to clarity as we look at how to capitalize on this opportunity in ReFi.
100%. And also, I think one thing that I think just to also invite in is like how to have fun with it too. It's like to recognize like there's a chance here to play with everything, and I think there's like, that's one thing I remember we talked about before too, is just like that like, hey, like we're up against, some like really interesting old paradigms, interesting problem spaces or problem sets. And it's like, it's a chance to play with all of it. And there's going to be some stuff that rubs people the wrong way. There's going to be some stuff that like makes total sense. And it's a chance to sort of like wade into the sort of like wade into the murkiness of some of this together. Cause it's not, it's like not quite black and white. And there's like many different shades and many different angles and vantage points, in the same way, like, for example, one could make the case like, great, like venture capital coming in, there's positives, there's also costs. Like, can we play with that and see where it's beneficial and where it's costly, and actually have, I think the thing that I feel like maybe has been lacking at points is like true discourse, like actually having, like letting go of the need to be right and being like, can we just have fun with this? Can we start to recognize like, hey, there's something really beautiful here that's really developing as a space, ReFi. And we've got so many talented founders, community members, people that are rallying together. What is it going to take for this to succeed? It's going to take a village, right? And so how can we start to bridge? We talked about this before too, but bridge building across viewpoints, across worlds, across people, part of which is going to be, listening to, seeing how the other side could be true, and then crafting the win for alls, like, and that's like, that I think is a part of it. Feels like, what an invitation here is too for, in our space is like, great. Can we really facilitate a space where sides are heard, bridges are built, and we can really start to craft and co-create win for alls, recognizing like, yeah, there's many different vantage points that are all going to come together, and creating a space for them to be heard.
Totally. I think that playful co-creating energy is exactly how to overcome those hurdles of tribalism and extraction. Because I think there's something in extraction that like, tells us we need to grow up and we need to face reality and see the world and go get a job. Like it's that kind of same voice. It's
exactly. And it's like, throw up a middle finger, it's like, and it's like, there's a way of being serious about it, being like, well, okay, well then I'm not gonna resist. But I think there's another way of just like, the rebellious like teenager, just like the middle fingers up, like we're gonna have fun with it. Like you might try to take the life away from me, but we are here and we are standing and we are having fun. And nobody can ever take that away. Like the only person that can actually ever take away your own humanity is yourself.
Totally, man. And I think there's something empowering in that like rebellious nature to be playful and not take ourselves too seriously. Like I think it was a big reason why I wanted to carve out more space for myself, and just have more time to invest in the podcast and in the early stage founder community at ReFi DAO. Just because like when you've got a lot on, there's so much, happening. It's very easy to be super serious and stressed out. And like, we don't make good decisions. We're not good collaborators. Like we're not good people. At least I'm not when I'm stressed out. And so, I think like this is definitely something I want to uphold and to just create a space and like invite this this community as we build bridges from like the
seriously.
the climate science space, the Web2 climate movement. As we look at different forms of capital coming in, like how can we really embrace the parts of ourselves that bring us to life and we know are beautiful, and share that with others and work towards addressing these challenges, which when you look at them, like they can be quite scary, but I think
pretty daunting.
I think we kicked
seriously.
off.
Yeah. Sorry. Go for it.
No, you're good. It's just when we kicked off the first episode of season 1, go through the like quick do skim through of the empirical basis of climate change, and like for a lot of people who haven't seen it, like it definitely hits you, and if you really look at it, it can be incredibly daunting, and there's a lot of criticism around climate folks adhering to a kind of doomerist narrative, and I think it's important sometimes to be shaken and see reality as they are, but also like to imagine the better world that's possible when we redesign manufacturing, transportation, energy, cities. Everything has a more beautiful face to it on the other side of fossil fuels. We have such an incredible future ahead if we can just embrace a new way of doing things and a new way of interacting with each other and with the earth. And I think Web3 is an amazing coordination tool to enable that, but like it's not the end all be all. It's a tool, it's a piece of the puzzle, and it's so important for the Web3 movement to really adhere to the physical realities of what it takes to regenerate the earth, what it takes to rebuild supply chains, and to recognize that we don't have all the answers, but we got some powerful tools to throw into it. So
yeah. And one thing I'll also I think, and this is maybe another dimension of tooling that I think is important for this, is actually some of the emotional tooling as well. Like recognizing, because I think, and I just like reflecting on my own personal journey, like it is scary to see and to face the extent to which we have ravaged our own environment and earth. And that's like, and it's like, you look at the statistics, you look at the loss of, and it's just like, in California, the wildfires, like you start to come to terms with that. And it's sad and it's scary too, to be like, gosh, like how do we actually move forward from here? And so I think a part of, and we know, I think just a part of this that I think is also going to be key is there's the technological tools, there's the collaboration, there's all these sorts of sets of tools. And also part of, I think, the invitation too is like, can we feel all of our feelings all the way through and not be reprojecting those feelings, like in a way that's, can be destructive, right? Because when we like come from a place of threat and reactivity and scarcity, it recreates oftentimes, at least from my personal experience, like the same thing that you are trying to ultimately actually address. And so I think it's like, can we, part of, I think this sort of step here is like inviting and accepting ourselves for where we are and what we are feeling, allowing ourselves to feel, and then being able to step into what we want and stepping into creation and stepping into, great, where do we want to move forward from here? And it's a lot harder said than done. It requires really slowing down and being willing to face where we are.
And to be in relationship with others who can hold you accountable and help you when you're not behaving in that way. And like, I think that's such a hard piece that we've lived here in England, living in community with other families. Like when you open yourself up to your own emotion and you open others up into it, you're raw, you're vulnerable, you're exposed. And yet, the paradigm that you mentioned, I think is so clear and so true that we have to be so careful as we respond to this crisis of climate change. The narrative we use has, predominantly been centered around war and this kind of mindset of scarcity that really does perpetuate the patterns and behaviors of the past. And so I think it's such a delicate balance to both see things as they are and recognize the reality of our situation, and also to hold a different posture as we look at how to address it. And so I think I would hope as we speak to these amazing guests for the next 12 weeks and we invite conversation with the community that we can experiment at least and try and find so maybe a new culture that can grapple with this, because I don't really see many truly regenerative cultures out there that can give people the space to completely be as they are, to see the world as it is, to have open and honest dialogue about the problems and the challenges at hand, and yet also move towards addressing it in a co-creative, an impassioned way that leverages the tools of technology and storytelling to make a difference. So it's gonna be fun to see how this all plays out.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I feel like you hit the nail on the head. It's like creating a space for people to accept, themselves, the world as they are, and then co-creatively move forward. And I think my hope is, and I think for everybody that's listening and for everybody that's tuning in, like as a part of the journey for us to be able to engage in that way together, we're talking about this from like a macro and, perspective, but like to really embody some of these principles ourselves, to be like, great, can we have thoughtful conversations around what is happening, the tactical of the right now of like, great, how do we think about bringing and bridging carbon credits on chain? How do we think about MRV? How do we think about these tactical pieces of infrastructure that we need to build now, while also holding that sort of, that deeper place as well, that's sort of holding that space of, great, can we engage in this in a co-creative way? And I feel like you've really embodied that too with ReFi DAO, just like, great, can we create space for collaboration and see this as an ecosystem that's really coming up towards the same mission, as opposed to siloed players that are all working on their own thing. Because, that feels, again, similarly a recreation of like things we've seen in the past of competitive zero-sum mindsets, winner takes all. And unless you win, it's like, it's pointless. So that's, I think, something which is so critical. And I love that you brought that up of like, great, can we really create that space? Man, wow. It's so beautiful. So beautifully said, John.
And to also balance like the detailed deep dives into the technical aspects and the decisions that you have to make in that setting. Like I knew in my time at Toucan, there's some really hard decisions that need to be made as you build infrastructure for, environmental asset markets. There's some really hard decisions about how to, collaborate and coordinate, how to design incentive structures. This stuff is not easy. There's a lot of complexity. And so I think the piece you mentioned around MRV is so key. Is we've looked what different levers there are to accelerate this movement. The interface between the off-chain and the on-chain world, the measurement, reporting, and verification seems like, the major unlock for this space. And so I'm so grateful we had a chance over MRV Day, both the events in the Global South and Europe and North America, to have a glimpse at like, what is the future of this? Who's bringing what kind of tools and infrastructure to really enable radical confidence about deploying trillions of dollars of capital all around the world, and knowing that money's actually having the impact that we intend, and recognizing that this is about human behavior. It's about specific people in a specific geography doing a specific action. And, the data is a representation of this. And so there's some absolutely brilliant people that are pushing this space forward, and also folks, who've been doing this for a long time, who've made incredible ground that some people often look past for whatever reason. Like I think of, folks like Regen Network. I think Web3 often likes recreating the wheel and they just want to do everything over again. But looking at Sam Bennett's State of the DMRV at Regen Network and knowing the incredible depth of technology that they've built and what this will enable, and knowing that actually the bottleneck in their case isn't the tech, it's we need more scientists, we need more people who can help us pioneer these methodologies. We need the academic community to really jump on board and embrace this. And then that pushes away from just ReFi into the whole like decentralized science community, which I'm so excited to have a chance to talk more about and look into. And I think like this season, some people have been calling it ReFi summer, whatever it is the era of recognizing regeneration is the future. It's the only future we've got. We need to throw science at it. We need to throw finance at it. We need to throw everything at this space and create a new culture and discover what it's like to be human in the age of transition. And I know that's something that you've been thinking a lot about, designing new economic paradigms at Magic VC. Is there anything you want to give us a glimpse on in terms of the fund you're raising, like your thesis and what you're looking at?
It's so funny because you were talking, we were talking about the technicals of the deep, and it's now having this fund. So, I mean, Magic Ventures, traditional sort of, it's like venture fund focused on early stage Web3, but with this focus on regenerative finance and beginning to sort of really explore how does venture capital sort of fit into, we talk about sort of like regenerative and sustainable future, beginning to just explore and actually begin to have open conversations around that. So it's interesting because I can tell you from now having raised, right, this initial fund, you have different, you have LPs, which have their own, they have their own desire to let's say, for example, grow their money, right? And see a return. And so it's interesting because, it's you see these different interests and you see these different mindsets and you have the technicalities of great, how do you set up a fund? There's a lot of work that goes into the fund admin, creating the pool, creating actually all the infrastructure to be able to deploy capital, and it's so there's an element here too of we need to be making decisions in the micro, but there's all, and it's that balancing act of how do you do something in integrity while at the same time, recognizing you have needs to meet, you have stakeholder interests, you have all these different parties that have various requirements. You have the government, right? The SEC, the IRS, everybody that has their own way of looking at it, and so it's everybody's got their own lens. But, with Magic, I think the thing that I'm really excited about, one quote that I love is, any sufficiently advanced technology is like magic. And I think, from my perspective is with Magic and with Magic Ventures, really, this is about can we support on a foundational level breakthrough technologies that are going to lead to, a more beautiful world, a more regenerative world, and a world that feels, one of the themes for this year really for me has been reaching for magic. What sort of in the wake of, I think trying to find purpose in life, recognizing making money and some of these other pieces were not necessarily fulfilling in and of themselves. For me, I think what I really came to was actually experiencing magic in life, and that's what led to Magic Ventures and sort of some of the seed ideas that were there. But that's the intention with Magic is very much to hey, how can we support and fund the projects, support the founders at the grassroots foundational level that are going to be pioneering these sort of new technologies that will support and anchor a more magical world, a world that is much more inclusive, that's much regenerative, that's supporting thriving life for all. In the same way that Cello is really advocating for prosperity for all, I think there's a very similar way here of can we really support both on an intellectual level, on a at a fund level, technologies that are going to really uplift humanity and all life on Earth in a fundamental way. So we just got off the ground, and so I mean, it's been such a process of even to some of these points, thinking about. Great. When you start a fund and raise a fund, you're thinking about where is there investable opportunity? You feel, you have your responsibility back to your LPs and wanting to do a good job in terms of returning capital. So it's interesting, it's easy to see how that mindset then turns into great, where you see opportunity, you want to invest, and that's as a way of fulfilling that sort of responsibility back. And a part of this is sort of it's within the system being able to reinvent and see what wants to happen. But yeah, I mean, that's a little bit there, but that's what I'll share about Magic.
Totally. And I think it's interesting you've kind of recently switched from the founder side to the investor side of the equation. Obviously you founded your own firm, but it's such a pivotal point in this movement. I think conscious capital coming into the space, understanding what it's like to be a founder, and recognizing that we're deploying money to accelerate the transition to a new economic paradigm. And I love that spirit that you have in this, and also Ed Walters and Tomer and Maria from Flory, also Alex from Era VC. There's a community of ReFi investors that are coming on board that really hold this gravity of consciousness that I'm super excited about. And I'm very curious to see what surfaces and what new public goods that we can create to make it easier, like you said, for people to both enter into this space, but also, invest from a value standpoint, and how we can kind of make it easier for early stage founders to get investment from all around the world, specifically those marginalized communities that are often excluded from the benefit of startup ecosystems. And so I'm super stoked to have your lens over the next 12 weeks and hopefully beyond as we go through this process, because climate needs capital to work, and there's a lot of money to be made, but it's a careful act to be weighed.
100%. And I think, and that's something which I've been like, holding for myself too, is the okay, there is the investor hat, and then there's also the sort of what feels authentic and integrity as a person, and sort of like balancing those two around, for example, there is money, let's just say for the sake of argument, there is money to be made. What is a way that can happen in a way that is truly beneficial and win for all for everybody involved? And I think that's I think the lens that I'm trying to hold is, how do we create the win for alls, even including as an investor? And I think recognizing, like to your point, capital does hold value, as well as networks and expertise and being able to come in and support. Like, there is a role, I believe, that venture capital has to play with particular kinds of projects that need capital to break through and get things going. Like, it's not that venture capital is inherently bad. Like, there is a role for it to play.
Totally.
Can it get out of whack? 100%. It can totally, it can get divorced from the real need that it's trying to meet for the sake of profit or return. And I think that's the thing that I think is really interesting. What I'm trying to hold as well, and I think part of the exploration over the next 12 weeks with you too, is how can we, how to hold that lens, like really understanding and being an open inquiry of great, as an investor, as somebody who has a fund, I am actively thinking about this, and I want to be talking, I'm planning on talking with tons and tons of founders to understand what are the needs, where does venture capital actually add value in a way that is a win for all. So it doesn't come from a place of extraction of, there's opportunity here, I'm going to take it for myself, in a way that bleeds the underlying structure, because that's what we've done in the past, So I think that's part of what I'm holding too is, it's like, can we see the opportunity and then approach it from a place that is truly win for all the sides to the best that we can, recognizing we do need to make decisions in the micro, but to hold that as the intention.
Absolutely, man. And I think, it's going to be fascinating to see how the broader Web3 space learns from the mistakes of the recent past with the likes of Terra and the UST collapse. Also, Three Arrows Capital obviously being, a massive bundle of mess. And just, I think the general precedent of risk, of leverage, and sometimes greed, of really just wanting more. And yes, I was totally, put my hand up and admit, curious and interested in DeFi, because it's wait, how much yield? What? How does this work? Where does the money come from? There is something innately motivating about money and the presence, and we can't deny that this is a really powerful thing that enables a lot of stuff in life. And yet at the same time, I think there has to be a level of consciousness and awareness about what is feasible, what is sustainable, and how we can use that energy towards good. And I think specifically around the whole KlimaDAO experiment, I think that was why I was so interested in this space, was saying, can you actually have an opportunity to make a lot of money while also doing good for the planet? And I'm very much looking forward to talking to the Klima Core a bit later this week and seeing their thoughts, because it seems as though they've kind of exhausted the emissions of that promise. It's trading now at $3 per token, and it seems like there needs to be a bit of a rebuilding around that initial, which was for a period of time flagship project in the space, but now it's it's got a bunch of old credits from 2008 and beyond, which have now been prohibited and banned. And it's like, what do we do with this stuff? How do we move this forward? And is it? Yeah.
I mean, I think that's in some ways like it feels like in crypto, there's fits and starts. There's like, holy shit, we're flying, like, rise up really quickly, and then like things start to crash, and it's like, well, shit, what the fuck are we doing? And it's sort of like this sort of I mean, that's what, and that's part of, I feel like, the innovation cycle. It's like things rise up, they draw attention. It's sort of like, and then in the fall, that sort of like, whatever, fertilizes the soil for the next set of things to really come up, and it could be within the same project, but it's just like new ideas, new streams, we're figuring this out. And I think, one of the things that I think is really, we touch on that I think is also relevant to sort of like, I think bring into this is money itself is a story. Money itself is an agreement that we make with each other around what we value and how value flows in our society. And I think part of, what we have an opportunity here too, as we, are talking about projects and talking about currencies and, just different tools to play with, is that if we just think of currency as a way of solidifying and encoding a set of agreements around what we can do and how we can operate, well then, if we simply create a different starting point of agreements, and have new economies around those underlying principles, well then that's, it's like we can shift the story around money. Money is simply energy, but it's like there's the currency, there's the consciousness, there's the sort of underlying agreements that we make with each other. But yeah, it's an interesting thing that we can start to play with that as well, and recognize like it just there's a way in which, like, I think the hyper leverage of crypto feels like it's reaching, it's like it just feels like there's a reaching for something different that we're, and it's like there is a lot of this movement that's happening, but it just feels like we're on the precipice of some sort of a breakthrough. I think just on a foundational level of like, not just one breakthrough, but breakthroughs in thinking about and how we conceive of value. Because that's what money is supposed to. Money is simply a set of incentives, to like encourage a particular form of behaviors, and that it's malleable in a way that we haven't been able to mold before. Net zero is a part of now the vernacular. It's becoming a part of like mainstream conversation. People are thinking about this, and I think the truth is like ReFi is the space where the tools of creating new systems meets a new system to be created. Like, it's like the greatest problems of our time that if people have been trying to like sort of like tackle with conventional tools for the past several decades now meets a new set of like people and communities and tools that I believe have the capacity to address, the underlying pitfalls of what we've seen before in trying to make meaningful progress, like particularly on verifiability and open marketplaces and composability. Like, there's so much of these things that have been lacking in sort of siloed attempts at addressing these problems that I believe crypto can help solve. But that's
100%,
right?
And I think it has to be like technology agnostic. I think there's like this early murmurings of like, oh, ReFi only happens on, specific chain Y or specific chain Z, and like beginning to kind of try and hold and own this thing. It's like, if that's how you're thinking of this movement, like, you have no idea how big this is going to be. Like,
it's going to be huge.
We're talking about redesigning the entire global economy with regenerative economics and having value flows that, supersede nation states. Like, come on, this is massive. Yes. We need everybody in this. We need a pluralist approach. We need experimentation. We need as many different people trying out things, and to embrace and to welcome people, and not to have this kind of like, oh, well, I've been in it since, year Y or bull cycle X. It's just like,
gosh.
We've really got to welcome the masses. If this is going to work, we've got to have billions of people leveraging these tools and, supporting a community of regeneration. So I think that's a strong shift as we begin to look at what are the values that drive this culture and how can we support one another to have the greatest impact, and really take advantage of this moment and have fun.
For me, at least, what ReFi has given is hope. It's possibility. it's recognizing that I think some of the most brilliant changes happen in nonlinear ways. And it's like, when you extrapolate from a particular mindset, sometimes it's difficult to see how things are going to unfold. And I think that's what's really possible here is like rapid movement, radical change in a non-linear way that feels within reach, and it feels exciting, and it feels possible, and it feels like, yes, like this is where if we put our time and our energy and really come together using all the tools that we have, we can really create meaningful change and create a better world for our future generations, for us and for the people ahead of us, for like humanity ahead of us, like a new way of being and in relationship with Earth and one another that like could create the undergirding for a next step in human evolution. Like that's what feels possible here. Like
the bull case for ReFi, man. I love it.
That is it. Like, and that's what, and it was like, I was talking to like Sep, and I'm like, at some point, like, it's like things like beauty and things like relationship and community, they matter. And unfortunately, with our current system, that which matters but is not accounted for gets often neglected. If it's not adding to GDP, it's like the energy focuses on what we put it. It's like human energy goes towards where we put attention to. And a lot of our attention right now is towards money. So things that were invisible and in the gift, like got written off. But that's a choice. And I think when we can start to wake up and become more self-aware, we realize that we have that creative choice. And I think it's about creating, like for everybody that is waking up and ready to step into something new, creating a space that is nurturing and regenerative, that is welcoming, to greet those people in and be like, yes, we are all here and we are here together and we are all working towards a more beautiful world.
Welcome to ReFi.
Right?
Yes,
Let's
sir.
go!
Oh, yeah, bro, I love it. Yeah, man, it's gonna be so fun. We got a chance to talk to Sep and some other awesome folks at Cello.
Yeah.
It's been heating up ReFi summer on that layer one. They've spent so much time building community there. Really, really looking forward to that. And also have a chance to talk with Luis from Moss. I feel like that company has done such incredible work and really seem to be on the cutting edge and have a great insight into the carbon market to past, the carbon market to come. They are great collaborators. Got really very much looking forward to it. And then, yeah, man, what else are you looking forward to in terms of the podcast lineup? Who's really coming to mind for you in terms of folks we're going to be speaking with?
I mean, so much. I think that, everybody that we're going to be talking to, I think like on the MRV side, on the, the declimate side, I think we're going to build some bridges with people, from like the traditional world. We got some, dear friends from, organizations like Pioneers and people that have been doing a lot of deeper thinking. We got some secret guests coming up, people that have been thinking about, how do we, like all sides. I think one of the things that we've done a really good job of, it feels like for this season, is like really creating a roundtable of many different kinds of perspectives. Everything from, like how we think about carbon and carbon credits, to ecological diversity, down to beauty and the consciousness of money, down to the sacred feminine, and like how we think about energies and, think about creating community and culture. Like it feels like we've got a beautiful roundup of different kinds of people.
Definitely, man. And one that I don't think many people know about today, but I've had a great set of conversations with, is Malika from Questa Games and Guardians of Earth. I just feel like there's something there in the biodiversity space that is just waiting to really burgeon off the back of the carbon market and everything that's come from it. And so, also looking at blue carbon, how we scale MRV in the oceans, and just like, the different kind of cultures and communities that can come out of new ways of organizing. I think, the kind of grassroots bottom up on one side with the heavily capitalized large scale corporate on the other hand. Like we've got a real interesting diversity of space. And I think it's gonna be fun, man. So so looking forward to it. And as always, yeah, the chance to connect with guests, the chance to connect with listeners, and learn and enjoy the ride is really why we're here. So it's grateful. I'm super grateful to have a chance to take the time to enjoy it, and super appreciative of Climate Collective for giving us a chance to really go deep, get some community managers on board, hire a production team for the next 12 months and really take this, to as many people as possible and see who shows up.
Seriously. Yeah. I'm like, it's going to be so much fun. We've got a great lineup of speakers. And for anybody that's, will we have everybody scheduled by the time? If there's people too, if there's suggestions, that come in from people that are listening, we can, I think part of what we're crafting is like, great, we're coming in, we've got people like Sepp, we got people that are like, we've got so many different kinds of perspectives. And so of course we're open to broadening out as well. I think it's we've got some brilliant folks, people that are at the cutting edge of what's going on. And I'm excited.
Yeah, fun, man. And maybe some moonshots too. Some people.
That's right. We got some moonshots. I mean, we're working on some great moonshots here.
Let's see who comes. Awesome, man. Super fun. All right. Well, I guess we'll see you next week and kind of kick things off, and we can get into a rhythm and see how it flows.
That sounds great.
Yeah, man. There's so much that we can learn from each other, and just it's gonna be a good adventure, and we'll see you next week, bro.
Cool. Awesome, John. I'll see you next week. Peace, mates.
All right, Simar. Peace, buddy.